Imagine standing at the edge of an ocean at dusk, the waves thrashing, the wind howling, the sky bruised with twilight. Now, imagine dipping your hands beneath the surface and discovering, just inches below the chaos, a depth so still, so undisturbed, that it feels like another world entirely. This is the paradox of inner peace. It is not the absence of storms, but the presence of an unshakable stillness beneath them. And yet, so many of us spend our lives buffeted by the surface waves, unaware that the hidden key to instant tranquility has been within us all along. What if I told you that the doorway to serenity is not found in another meditation technique, another self-help book, or another retreat into solitude? What if the secret is not in adding something to your life, but in remembering something so simple, so fundamental, that it has been overlooked precisely because it is too close, too obvious? The mystics have whispered of it, the poets have danced around it, and the philosophers have circled it like moths around a flame. But few have named it plainly, for it is not a concept to be grasped, but a truth to be recognized. We live in a world that worships effort, that prizes struggle, that equates peace with the hard-won spoils of spiritual labor. But what if peace is not a distant summit to be climbed, but the very ground upon which we stand? What if the key is not in doing, but in undoing, not in seeking, but in ceasing to seek? The mind, like a frantic bird trapped in a cage of its own making, exhausts itself searching for freedom, unaware that the door has always been open. This is the great irony of the human condition. We long for peace, yet we resist the one thing that allows it to arise: surrender. Not surrender to defeat, but surrender to what is. The present moment, untouched by past regrets or future anxieties, holds an infinite reservoir of stillness. But we are so accustomed to the noise, so addicted to the turbulence of thought, that we mistake the storm for reality. The hidden key is not a method, not a mantra, not a ritual. It is the sudden, luminous recognition that you are already home. And yet, words can only point. Like a finger gesturing at the moon, they are not the thing itself. To know this peace, you must look within not as a seeker, but as one who has momentarily forgotten the way back to themselves. The key is not hidden in some esoteric teaching. It is hidden in plain sight, woven into the fabric of your very awareness. If these words stir something in you, if they awaken a quiet knowing, a resonance beyond the reach of language, then perhaps you are ready to explore this truth more deeply. If so, I invite you to like, comment, and subscribe, not as an obligation, but as a silent nod to the journey we are about to undertake together. For those who are willing to look beyond the surface, the next revelation awaits. The mind is a palace of mirrors, each reflection distorting the light of awareness until we no longer recognize the original source. We chase after images, happiness, success, enlightenment, never realizing that the chase itself is the veil. The hidden key to instant inner peace is not found in another reflection, but in the space between them, in the silence that holds all thought, in the awareness that watches without grasping. At its core, this peace is not something to be attained, but something to be realized. It is not a destination, but the very ground of your being. Imagine a river so consumed by its own waves that it forgets it is water. The turbulence is real, but the essence, the fluid, boundless nature of the river never changes. So it is with the mind. Thoughts rise and fall, emotions surge and fade, but beneath them all lies an unchanging stillness, an awareness that has never been disturbed. This is the first universal law of inner peace. What you seek is what you are. The seeker and the sought are not two. The moment you stop searching for peace outside yourself in possessions, achievements, or even spiritual experiences, you begin to notice it has been here all along, like the sun hidden behind clouds. The clouds may obscure it, but the sun never disappears. The second law is this: resistance is the only suffering. Pain is inevitable in life: loss, disappointment, physical discomfort, but suffering is optional. Suffering arises when we argue with reality, when we refuse to accept what is. A thought arises. This shouldn't be happening. And like a man trying to hold back the tide, we exhaust ourselves fighting the inevitable. But when we release the resistance, when we allow the wave to pass through us instead of against us, we discover something astonishing. The wave was never the problem. Our struggle was. This brings us to the third law. Presence is the antidote to chaos. The present moment is the only place where life actually happens. The past is a memory, the future, a projection. Both are ghosts, illusions woven by the mind. Yet we spend our days lost in these mental labyrinths, mistaking the map for the territory. The hidden key is not to silence the mind an impossible task, but to step back from it, to become the silent witness rather than the frantic participant. You may wonder, if it's so simple, why does it feel so elusive? Because the mind, like a cunning illusionist, distracts us with its tricks. It convinces us that peace must be earned, that enlightenment is for the chosen few, that we are not yet ready. But these are just more thoughts, more waves on the surface. The depth does not require preparation, it only requires recognition. And so we arrive at the final, most subtle truth. There is nothing to do, only something to see. Not with the eyes, but with that innermost knowing, the silent whisper beneath the noise. When this seeing happens, not as an intellectual understanding, but as a direct, wordless realization, the search ends, not because you have found anything, but because you have stopped running from yourself. This is the architecture of stillness, simple, timeless, and always available. But like a forgotten language, it must be remembered, not learned. There is an ancient story, told in many forms across cultures, of a prince raised in poverty who never knew his royal birthright. He wandered the world as a beggar, scavenging for scraps, unaware that he carried within him the keys to an invisible kingdom. One day, a wandering sage recognized him not by his tattered clothes, but by the way the light caught his eyes when he laughed. With a single sentence, "You are not who you think you are," the prince remembered. The rags fell away like an old skin, not because he changed, but because he saw himself clearly for the first time. This is not merely a tale. It is the story of every human being who has ever searched for peace outside themselves. The beggar is the mind, convinced of its own limitation. The sage is the silent awareness beneath thought, the one who knows. And the kingdom? It is the boundless presence that has been here all along the hidden key, disguised as nothing at all. In Zen, there is a saying, "The moon does not get wet in water, nor is the water broken by the moon. The reflection is inseparable from the surface, yet the moon remains untouched." So it is with awareness and its contents. Thoughts, emotions, sensations, they arise like reflections on a lake, but the lake itself remains undisturbed. We spend our lives chasing reflections, mistaking them for reality, never realizing we are the lake. A famous koan tells of a master who hands his student a sword and commands, "Cut the stream in half." The student, baffled, swings the blade through the water again and again, only to watch the stream reunite instantly behind each stroke. Exhausted, he finally understands the stream was never divided. In the same way, the mind tries to fix itself, to cut through its own chaos, not realizing that effort itself is the only obstacle. Peace is not achieved by violence against thought, but by seeing thought as the fleeting mirage it is. A bird does not think to itself, "I must stay aloft or I will fall." It simply flies, held by the sky without effort. The moment it doubts, it plummets. This is the paradox of surrender. The more you try to grasp peace, the more it eludes you. But when you stop trying, you find it was never lost. You are the bird and the sky. The fear of falling is the only thing that ever made you fall. In a monastery high in the mountains, there hangs a bell that does not ring. Pilgrims climb for days to see it, expecting some great revelation. When they arrive, the master simply points to the bell and says, "Listen." At first, they hear nothing. Then, slowly, they realize the silence is the teaching. The bell's purpose is not to make sound, but to reveal the space between sounds. In that space, the hidden key turns by itself. These stories are not metaphors. They are maps to a territory beyond words. Like fingers pointing at the moon, they guide without explaining, because the truth they point to cannot be contained in language. It must be seen. 0.28. The great paradox of inner peace is that it requires no special conditions, yet flourishes most vividly when embodied in ordinary moments. It is not found on mountaintops or in meditation caves, but in the way you stir your morning coffee, in the pause between traffic lights, in the half-forgotten breath you take before answering a difficult email. The hidden key does not ask you to change your life, but to change your relationship with life, to meet each moment as it is, not as you believe it should be. Most spiritual traditions speak of disciplines, hours of meditation, strict rituals, controlled breathing. But the deepest practice is the absence of practice, the unlearning of effort, the dissolution of the seeker. This does not mean abandoning structure, but seeing through it. When you wash dishes, simply wash dishes. When you walk, simply walk. The mind will protest, "This is too simple. Where is the transformation?" But that is precisely the point. The transformation is in the falling away of the need to transform. Consider how children play fully absorbed, yet completely unattached. A child builds a sandcastle with total devotion, then watches the tide take it without mourning. This is the natural state of presence, before the mind learned to cling. You need not achieve this state, you need only notice where it already exists in your life. Perhaps when you lose yourself in music, or in the touch of a loved one's hand, or in the stillness just before sleep. These are not escapes from reality, but doorways into it. In art, what is not drawn is as important as what is. A vase is defined by the emptiness around it. So too, with inner peace. The mind's habit is to fill every silence with thought, every pause with planning. But the spaces between the breath after a sigh, the quiet before a response hold the essence. Try this. Next time you feel rushed, hesitate. Do not act immediately. Notice the gap. In that gap, the entire universe breathes. Modern life thrives on the myth of mastery over schedules, emotions, destinies. But true peace arises when you recognize the fragility of that illusion. You cannot control the world, you can only meet it. A storm does not ask permission to rage. A loved one does not ask permission to leave. The hidden key is not in managing life, but in surrendering to its flow, not as resignation, but as the ultimate act of trust. A Zen monk was once asked, "What is enlightenment?" He replied, "Chopping wood, carrying water." After his awakening, he continued chopping wood and carrying water only now. He knew who was doing it. This is the secret. There is no spiritual life separate from daily life. The sacred is hidden in plain sight, in the way you tie your shoes, in the taste of an apple, in the weight of a shared silence. To see this is to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary, without changing a single thing. The implications are radical. If peace is available now, then every moment becomes an opportunity not for progress, but for recognition. A traffic jam is no longer an obstacle, but a chance to notice the sky. A difficult conversation is no longer a threat, but a doorway into deeper listening. The key does not open a distant gate. It reveals that the gate was never locked. We began this journey at the ocean's edge, where the surface chaos met the depths of stillness. Now we arrive at the simplest and most profound realization. You are both the wave and the ocean. The turbulence you've been trying to escape was never separate from the peace you sought. The hidden key was hidden only because it was too close, like a fish searching for water or a bird seeking the sky. This is not philosophy. This is not abstraction. This is the living truth of your experience in this very moment. The mind may rush in with objections, but what about my problems? My pain? My past? And to this, there is only one response. Look again. Who is it that carries these burdens? Who is it that believes peace must be earned? Behind every thought, every fear, every story of lack, there is a presence that has never been troubled. You are not the storm. You are the space that holds it. All spiritual paths eventually lead to the same precipice the moment when you realize you have been chasing your own shadow. The guru, the scripture, the technique, they were never the source. They were only mirrors reflecting back to you what you already are. Now the mirrors can fall away. What remains is not a state of perfection, but a simple, unshakable knowing. Nothing is missing. Nothing ever was. There is a story of a man who spent his life digging for treasure in distant lands, only to return home empty-handed. Exhausted, he collapsed into his old chair, and the weight of his body broke through the rotted floorboards, revealing the chest of gold that had been buried beneath his house all along. This is your moment of collapse. This is your invitation to stop searching and start seeing. The call is not to become peaceful, but to recognize you are peace itself. Not in some distant future, but now as these words dissolve into silence, as your breath rises and falls without effort, as the world moves through you like wind through an open window. If this journey has resonated with you, do not let it end here. Share it not because these words are special, but because the truth they point to is alive in everyone. Like a candle lighting another candle, the flame remains undiminished. Drop a comment below. Speak your realization or your doubt. Subscribe not to me, but to your own awakening. The conversation never ends. It only deepens. And now, the last secret. There is no final secret. The key was never hidden. The door was never locked. You were never lost. You are home. Welcome back.